Our theme was discovery in June. Lots that we were uncovering, learning about ourselves, dynamics. And then as we go into July, I was doing my analysis and figuring out what is the theme. And of course, I laughed because it kind of just popped in. And basically, what I landed on is this is the way. For anyone who has seen The Mandalorian, it's basically like that saying that they have. And I'm like, but it works. It works, and you'll see it. And it's not really about our focus, it's more about our experience of what's happening. Again, that's the perception. That's about how we are navigating Mars or actions. So if in June we just had a lot that was coming at us that we were just really needing to process and just like figure out what's going on and what all this means, we're getting a different version of that in July. It's less about super intense sorting mentally. It's more about like, so what does this mean? Now that I have this info, what does this mean and where do I go with it? And that's why, to bring us back, again, our theme for this month is this is the way. So we're trying to figure out like what the way is, like where we're going. And that is the work that we are doing. When we are talking about Mars, Mars is considered a malefic planet. This is something I've talked about before, meaning that it can sometimes have a quote negative connotation. It's not 100% of the time a bad thing, but things can very easily go awry. And similarly with Neptune, by some, it's also considered a malefic planet because we're talking about delusion and perception, and think about how easily that could teeter into the wrong direction. Mars is the planet of action and passion. It first entered Gemini. I'm speaking from the future. On June 28th. So, as of time of recording, it has not happened yet, but in July, this will be in the past. What this is really signaling is a contrarianism, urge to multitask, and maybe even some flightiness as well. What happens pretty much right off the bat at the beginning of the month is Mars squares the North Node. So, this is a point, a calculation, not another planet. But what this means is this is a call to action. The North Node is about our potential or our calling, or as a transiting North Node, which is the case here, it's something that we are moving towards, we're trying to grow towards. And when we have this square, it's a planet of action and then it's tension. So we're being really pushed and kind of, I usually say for an opposition, that's a challenge, but with a square, there's some sort of a lesson of like, ooh, okay. I guess that's the thing I have to learn. And the two players are what we are as a collective growing towards and what are our day-to-day actions and our motivations. So this is really trying to bridge that gap between the mind, the spirit, and our actions. And some questions that we might want to ask ourselves are, what else must we start learning to reach our potential? Similarly, what practices could we begin to fuse intellect, action, and our soul? And just 2 days later, we have the Mars-Uranus conjunction. A lot of these combos here and these planets that we're talking about are like, ooh, okay, this might be a little sticky, this might be uncomfortable, this might be different, this might not be something that we can fully 100% trust or just go along with. So when we're talking about a Mars-Uranus conjunction, Uranus is a planet of change and surprises. So as you can see, you have action with surprise, curveball. That might not be bad, but it could be not what we were expecting or hoping for. When we have a conjunction, that means that the two planets are at the same degree point of the same sign. Therefore, this is still in Gemini, so Mars has not left Gemini at this point in the timeline. It's recently there. It's going to be there for a bit. What this combo symbolizes is really disruptive tendencies. So we could be feeling like, I just want to go do this or do that or just do something different. We could be compelled to want to make some sort of really abrupt and sudden change. We could want to really reject authority, like rebelling, because that's another Uranian signature. So going against authority figures or systems, or maybe on the hopefully more positive, constructive side, that we're really called or have some sort of an impulse to want to invent or create or do something new. And that could, in fact, be very supportive, especially if it's coming from the Gemini background, where it's something that we've maybe researched or talked about or thought about, and that it's not totally baseless impulse or just from the desire of completely shaking things up or destroying them in some capacity. And as far as a question here, something that we could reflect on as this transit is happening, how can I navigate sudden change to move towards connection rather than chaos? A Venus-Uranus conjunction on April 23rd, and that was at the very last degree of Taurus. So we talked about that in the April weather report. Mars, which is a very different type of planet, and also now we're in Gemini. So there's a lot of pieces on the board that are different. So even though Venus and Mars are both personal planets and they're very relevant to how we are functioning in our day to day, this will not feel the same. And also, Venus is a benefic planet. So the just kind of everything about it is going to be totally different. Mercury, the other personal planet, made this conjunction at the first degree of Gemini in May on the 17th. So that's our closest comp here. And obviously, Mercury and Mars are still very different, but that's closer. So this is the third personal planet to make this conjunction. And that means we might want to check in on what did I learn around that time for Venus? Going to be the most different, but what did I definitely learn around that conjunction with Mercury? And then what's coming up now? Because it's a three-act play, if you will. And next up, what we have is Mars sextiling Neptune, which is the second planet that we're going to be talking about in this forecast. So this is a joining point. The two of them are coming together. They are not in the same sign, but when you have a sextile, you're a few signs over. So you're not immediately, but you're the one over from that. So two away. What we want to keep in mind is, given that both of them may be considered malefic planets, they are playing off of each other with the sextile. This is a push and pull. It may be nudging us to be a little bit more delusional in not our thinking, because this isn't Mercury, but in the types of actions that we take, that we are like, this seems like a good idea, or I want to do this. So that's where we want to get really mindful and be anticipating this, and maybe the best we can, trying to pause and not just going for the first thing that we're feeling called to do. However, a more positive, if you will, higher vibrational manifestation of this combo could be that we are taking action to encourage or listen to our intuition. That would be great. So that would be a way that we could tap into the same partnership that's being activated on that day by taking action, Mars, in alignment with listening to our gut, connecting with our spirit team, taking action towards our dreams, but we just don't want to go the super, like, we want there to be some grounding to it, and we're not in an earth sign here. So that's the part that's a little tricky. We're in fire and we're in air. And we need some combination of earth in order to make sure that this is not totally unfounded or unreasonable. So it's important to have a check. Speaking from the POV of Mars here, what we learned from that activation with the North Node about our purpose, with Uranus about change, with Neptune about our dreams, our beliefs, or maybe our intuition, that gets a huge boost, because then we have some other transits with a trine with Pluto. That happens the next day. And then we have a sextile 2 weeks later, so we have a little bit of a gap with Saturn. And what this means, just bringing all of those together, is that purpose, radical change, big dreams, foundational transformation, and mature clarity all are blending together to hone our actions. So, this is a journey for Mars, just as we had done for Venus and for Mercury in some previous months here. Mars is connecting with all of these same planets. It's the same sequence that we have had with those other personal planets along the way, where it's getting checked. Like, what about this? What about that? Have you considered this? Have you considered that? And I do appreciate the fact that we end with Saturn because that allows us to have grounding, if you will, but to try to contain all of that and make sure that we are viewing everything with maturity and thinking about the long term. But same thing with Pluto, too. Pluto is the slowest moving celestial body. So it's always thinking long game, it's thinking out decades worth of time. The hope is that we'll be in a position to better wield our personal power. If you want to think about what Mars is doing, it's that drive, that push. Okay, here's what I can do, and wielding it with greater intention. And a quote that came through was, "No time for fussing." So rather than what might be the classic Mars and Gemini signature, we have to remember that's where we are beginning this journey. We could be flighty. We could be like, oh, like maybe let's do this or do that, or just getting chatty, or we might not be taking things as, seriously or, joking around or thinking about the long term in the same way. And all of these checkpoints will help to shape that. Like the visual I have is you have, marble that you're chiseling to then get to that figure that you want. So a question that we could ask is, how can I be more purposeful with my next steps and stay steady to my bigger goals and growth journey? Neptune is a planet of reality and intuition. It first entered Aries at the very end of January. So it's new relative, but it's much, much, more comfortable being in Aries than Mars is in Gemini because this is a new leg of the journey. And I have talked about this in previous videos. If you want to learn more about the Neptune in Aries signatures, you can go to my blog, you can go to my YouTube channel, watch the overview on the really high level. It's associated with war and personal spirituality. Again, way more to unpack than just that, but that's the very, very simple baseline. So that's currently where we are. After the sextile with Mars that happened on July 4th, really the main focus for Neptune for the rest of the month of July is reaching that starting line of its annual retrograde. And once it does that, it starts backing up and then it backs into all of these aspecting transits. So it means it already had all of these other activations, but once it's backing up, again, it doesn't move very fast, but all these other planets are still moving forward. So they run into each other again, but now in a different context. And so that is what is on the agenda for Neptune. So the actual Neptune retrograde begins on July 7th. And this is at 4 degrees, 25 minutes of Aries, 6:55 a.m. Eastern Time. And for context, to really place us in time, the pre-shadow began on March 16th, and it will be stationing direct at 1 degree, 37 minutes of Aries on December 12th. As you can see, that's a long period of time. And we have the post-shadow, which that doesn't end until April of next year. So when we're talking about these annual retrogrades for the outer planets, they are so huge that the post-shadows overlap with each other. And that's something that happened earlier this year. It will happen again next year. But if we care just about the retrograde portion, then in this case, it's July 7th through December 12th, which is a long time. We are ultimately in for a long ride of illusion breaking. During Neptune retrogrades, our dreams are challenged. What we're hoping will pan out for our dreams, maybe that doesn't work. Maybe we're getting a huge reality check. Maybe ways that we have been lying to ourselves or others have been lying to us get revealed. It's like a big period of disillusionment, which could be a huge positive because it's like, okay, well, maybe you've been under this spell and not realizing that there has been deception or delusion. And when you are going back to review, because that's what a retrograde is about, it's being undone. You're like, oh, wait, okay, that doesn't make any sense. And so, depending on what said truth or deception is, it may feel great and it may not feel great. It may be like, oh, wow, that is a bummer. And ultimately, we're getting humbled back to reality. That's what happens during this period of time. So, some questions that we could ask ourselves: what is actually true? And what do I really know about myself and my innate capabilities? Because remember, whenever we're talking about Neptune, we also have the opportunity to think about our relationship with our intuition and with our dreams. So, what is really possible? And when we are in a quote, more grounded state, if you will, because of the retrograde, we're going to view everything a little bit differently. And in some cases, it might help to view things a little bit clearer, but it depends on a bunch of other mitigating factors. For the rest of July, Neptune encounters the same exact planets that Mars had, as well as others. The first is Uranus in a sextile, then Jupiter in a trine, followed by Pluto in a sextile. In sequence, this happens over the course of 10 days. And really, our perspective has to shift. So, when we're talking about Neptune, it's similar in some ways when we're talking about a Mercury transit, because Mercury is what's the mind? How are we processing things? How are we talking about things? When we're talking about Neptune, we are talking about perception, which can feel pretty closely related. But it's like, how am I viewing this? And what do I believe or not believe about what is happening? How am I interpreting it? So there is a bit of an overlap. It's not, the Venn diagram is not a circle, but there is a connection between the two of them. When we have that sextile with Uranus, we're thinking about what's our perspective on change. And that question could be, am I a rule follower or am I a rule breaker? And with that trine to Jupiter, we're thinking about our experience with abundance and wisdom. And we can ask ourselves, how can I expand my intuition? Remember, Jupiter is about growth. What could I apply this presence towards to help me grow? And then when we have that sextile with Pluto, we're thinking about trust for the long term. Like what do we believe or perceive could actually pan out? And types of questions we could ask may include, where am I holding back from letting it all go? Pluto always wants us to surrender so that we can be a phoenix from the ashes. And are there any perceptions or beliefs or ideas that we are clinging to that are preventing us from being able to do the work that Pluto is doing over the next 18 years? And second to that, what am I concealing from myself about who I'm really meant to be? This is getting at that self-deception piece. And the last stop on Neptune's choo-choo train this month is a trine with the sun. We are ultimately bringing more of ourselves into the mix and are encouraged to express. When we're talking about the sun, this is life force energy. This is what is seen in the light of day. And because this is coming at the end, we've had all of these checkpoints where we are learning, we're recontextualizing, we're asking ourselves a lot of questions, we're trying to reframe, we're still going to be reframing for many, many months into the future. But we had this kind of action packed, very intense window of kicking off that extended reflection. And when we have the trine with the sun, trines are supportive. There's ease, there's connection. So we are connecting what we have learned, how we are shifting with, I wouldn't say joy necessarily, but with clear, authentic expression, wanting to express literally what we have been learning, but also tapping into the calling of our authentic soul, not what we think we should be pursuing or dreaming about or imagining we could do, but connecting with the truth of what our reality is and what our reality could be. So when we gather this information, and then at the point in December, when we start going direct again, we can start being delusional in a good way of, yeah, this is what I want, but we're focusing on honing what that dream is and what that understanding is. So, what came through was I'll just read from my notes. We're experiencing what may feel like sidestepping rather than forward progress. However, it's all in due time and measured because the lessons learned will inform how we launch forward and evolve into more holistic, magnetic, and disarming versions of ourselves. Vulnerability is key, so don't look away from the truth.